Poetic Heart introduces PHTalks, an online show focused on creating dialogues.
Welcome back, viewers, to the second edition of the PHTalks. We've come back after a few years, but it's great to be back. We returned this year for an in-person event of Poetic Heart, and this talk show is a prologue to creating dialogue with the poets and musicians that would be part of this year's event. Let's welcome our first guest for this edition, an Italian poet, narrator, and musician, Claudio Pozzani, joining us from Genoa, Italy. Welcome, Claudio. We are privileged to have you.
Thank you to you. Thank you for the invitation. For me, it's always a very big pleasure to be together, Poetic Art, because it's a real event that is full of passion, and I like the thing that make together poetry and passion.
Thank you, Claudio. And I think I've heard this passion in your poetry when you recite your poetry on stage. So just to start off, would you like to give us a brief introduction about yourself for our viewers?
Yeah, I'm Claudio Pozzani. I am 61, and all my life is dedicated to, consecrated to poetry, because since when I was 18, I start my career of poet, and so it's also my profession. And for me, poetry is not only a passion, but also a way to express myself. Is my alphabet. So in poetry, I have found my dimension, and also the sound of words, the meaning of words. And I think that in this contemporary society, the strength of a word is a little less. We have to think very well to the word that we talk, we speak, because the word is very important. It's like a alchemy of our life. It's like our life is like distilled in what we tell. So this is for this that poetry is very important for me. Then also to be an author, I'm always organized several events, among also the Genoa Poetry Festival, that is the biggest and the oldest poetry festival in Italy, with almost 2,000 poets and artists came in Genoa during this 28th edition of the festival, from more than 90 nations in the world. So it's very a sort of bridge of culture and poetry and expression. Then, as a poet, I have been published in more than 15 nations and 15 languages in the world. So I always try to spread my poetry above all abroad, not only in Italy. And the poetry is my life.
Thank you so much, Claudio. That was a very good overview about yourself. You have obviously, been dedicated to the art of poetry. I would also like to tell our viewers that it's not your first time you're attending the event at Poetic Heart. You have attended 2 events in 2016 and in 2018. And among all the poems that you've shared, I think my personal favorite was "Seek in Yourself the Voice That You Can't Hear." I think the title itself makes you reflect on your inner voice. Sometimes that's drowned by all the noise that's around in the world. Could you share with us your experience? Because I've seen you perform on stage, and it would be great for our viewers to know something about those last two visits, which you thought was very close to your heart.
Yeah, as I told before, I'm very happy to be involved also in this edition of Poetical Art, because also the two times that I was there, I feel very deeply the passion that move your event. It's not so normal or banal things. This because not all the poetical or artistic event is
Also in the
moved
stage
there in Dubai. I feel also a real connecting with a different generation. There is always a lot of young people in your event, and I really appreciate this, because sometimes they say that poetry is some elitistic things for a few people or something in the past, but not. In my opinion, poetry is a real one of the way of communication that is eternal, and is behind the modes, the time. So is very important that also the young people can learn the importance of speaking poetry or learning poetry and living poetry. And you make this very well.
If I get my pronunciation right, poesia is
Ah,
what
bravo.
poetry is called in Italian. And I think you talk about the young people also having this love for poetry. I think one thing that really springs out is that the Italian language itself is very lyrical in nature, and it's almost, poetic in nature. I'd like to know from you, since you've been a poet all your life, as to give us a little bit to our viewers about the roots of Italian poetry.
Is a very long trip, but we start with the name poetry. Poesia is something that come from Greek, ancient Greek. The poien is a verb that mean make, create. So this is also something very interesting, that poetry is something to create, maybe a parallel world to create. On one side, Italy is very young nation, because it's only 170 years that is a nation, Italy. But Italian culture is something very, very long, with the Roman Empire, also before Etrusc and some other things. And okay, the poetry in Italy, we usual start with Dante Alighieri, La Divina Commedia, and in effect is the first very important poem write in Italian. In Italian vulgare. Italian was the start of a language, of Italian language. And after this, there is also a very important Italian poetry during the Renaissance, 19th century, where there is, for example, I don't know if in Dubai is known, but Giacomo Leopardi is one of the most important Italian poet of all the time. Giacomo Leopardi was not only a poet, but also a philosopher. And in the 20th century, I think, in my opinion, the Italian poetry was one of the most important and most important in the world, starting from Futurism, and then Ungaretti, then Montale, then all Calvino or Pasolini, Pavese. There was a very many poet, Italian poet that was famous in all the world, and Italian poetry was very important.
But thank you for that that flashback into the sort of rich history of Italian poetry.
Very
Now you
short.
no, that was a very brief, say 600-year history or more. But in the introduction, you also mentioned about your sort of role as founder and director of Genova Literary Festival. The day of age of Instagram poetry and the younger generation's attention span. I wanted to know if you would tell us how this literary festival is helping connect poetry to the new generation at your end.
Yeah, it's very important because, as I told before, sometimes there is the storyteller that poetry is not something modern or contemporary, but is something linked to the past. But it's not true, because very often the young generation are very interesting in poetry. Sometimes there is some parallel of poetry or real poetry, like Instagram poet, like slam, that is not this is a very long tell to this topic, but is important also to use correctly our language and try to enrich our language. For this is very important, the poetry also for the young generation. You imagine, for example, in Italy, Italian people in average, we use only 400 word in all our life. So is very poor vocabulary dictionary. And when you have a poor dictionary to express, you also, your thoughts is poor and your action is poor. So in this way, the poetry, but literature in general, is very important to enlarge our possibility to use word, and to enlarge so our way to think and our action. And another things that is very important for the young generation to understand, that the violence start when you finish the word to express. When you have no word, no more word, you start to have some violent acts. And for this reason, I think also poetry is a instrument of peace, because it helps to enlarge your possibility to express, and in this way they keep away the violence, I think.
That's an amazing connect that you've created. And first of all, it's a fact that I didn't know that there are 400 words, and yet there's such a rich literary history of Italian text and poetry. And of course, the point that you said, that when you write poetry or when you form poetry, you have to reflect. It's a sort of looking back inside. And I think that's where it disconnects from violence, because if you think, you don't act without thinking, I would suppose. But thank you for bringing it to the new generation, and I hope our viewers can connect to that thought and be inspired by poetry. I know your inspiration comes from spirituality, beauty, and love. I'd just like, if possible, just something that highlights this, this inspiration of yours in your poetry.
Yeah, is sometimes it's very difficult for me because in this world, in this society, in this time, all my column of my passion or my life, like culture, beauty, and inspiration, art, is considered like something useless. No, now all is around the things or material things or money of financial things, and all the things that help us to go higher is like useless. No, so for me is now to be a poet, to be an artist is also in some way also something revolutionary, and in which concern my experience, I took and I take my inspiration above all from everyday life, or above all, I write my poem, for example, when I walk. I walk in my town, and also the step by step when I walk add me to have a rhythm of my poetry, and also my breath, and this is also um, uh, the noise of the city around me. There is a very, if I can say, my poetry is inspired of what is outside me and inside me and the same time, and in the connection of out around me, inside me, and be above me, and it's spiritual. I think we have to think ourselves like not only a body and a mind, but also like a clouds in the sky, and we have always to be open to different winds, to different rains, to different lightning and thunder, and see all the elements. This universal try to put in a page, or in a frame, or in a song. So this is for me the art.
Thank you so much, Claudio, for joining us today at this first episode of the second edition of Poetic Heart Talks. Just before we conclude this enriching discussion, would you like to share a message for our viewers and the people who would be attending the Poetic Heart?
Yeah, above all, I want to thank you to give me the possibility to visit your fantastic town and fantastic event, and to meet you that really create this bridge, poetic bridge between us. And I think it's very, very important that all of us reads not only poetry, literature, but the reading is very important. Now less and less the people read, but is really to create a new society full of passion, full of inspiration. We have to feed our soul, our heart and our mind of the world and the masterpiece of all the artists that is around us.
It was a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to seeing you in person at the event. So for back to our viewers, this edition was a journey into the world of poesia, the land of Italian poetry, history, writing, music, art, and love. An engaging dialogue with the esteemed Italian poet Claudio Pozzani. Thank you for joining us for this session, and we look forward to seeing you at the next episode with another distinguished poet who would be attending the Poetic Heart event. We look forward to seeing you at the event as well on the 9th and 10th of Feb. So that's your host, Aditya, signing off for today's episode. Thank you.